Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the sterile hallway of St. Mary's General Hospital, her white coat wrinkled from a 14-hour shift that had started before dawn. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her tired face as she reviewed the patient chart in her hands. Room 314 contained a young construction worker who had fallen from scaffolding, presenting with what appeared to be internal bleeding and possible spinal trauma. The emergency department had been unusually quiet for a Tuesday evening until the ambulance arrived 20 minutes ago. Sarah had immediately recognized the severity of the case when the paramedics wheeled the patient through the automatic doors. The man's vitals were unstable, his breathing shallow, and his skin had taken on the grayish pallor that experienced medical professionals knew meant time was running out. Dr. Martinez. The sharp voice belonged to Harold Fleming, the hospital's chief administrator, a man whose primary concern seemed to be the bottom line rather than patient care. He approached her with his usual disapproving expression, his expensive suit somehow remaining pristine despite spending his days in a medical facility. Sarah looked up from the chart, immediately sensing tension in Fleming's posture. "Mr. Fleming, I need to get back to my patient. He requires immediate surgery, and we're preparing the operating room now. That's precisely what I want to discuss with you." Fleming's voice carried the bureaucratic tone that had made him unpopular among the medical staff. "I've reviewed this case, and I'm afraid we cannot proceed with the surgery." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at Fleming, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "The patient has no insurance coverage. Our records show he's unemployed, recently laid off from his construction job. The surgery you're proposing would cost the hospital approximately $60,000, and there's no guarantee of payment." Fleming adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses with the air of a man delivering a routine business decision. Sarah felt her hands tighten around the patient chart. "Mr. Fleming, this man is dying. Without immediate surgery, he'll be dead within the hour. We took an oath to do no harm, to save lives regardless of a patient's ability to pay. Dr. Martinez, I understand your passion, but you must also understand the financial realities of running a hospital. We cannot continue to absorb these costs. The board of directors has made it clear that we need to be more selective about charity cases." Fleming's tone suggested this was a reasonable business discussion rather than a matter of life and death. "Charity case?" Sarah's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from passing nurses. "This is a human being lying in there, fighting for his life. His name is Michael Rodriguez. He's 28 years old, married with 2 small children. His wife is driving here from across town right now, probably terrified and praying that we can save her husband." Fleming remained unmoved by her appeal to humanity. "I'm sorry, doctor, but the decision has been made. We'll stabilize the patient and arrange for transfer to County General. They have the resources to handle indigent cases." Sarah knew that County General was 30 minutes away by ambulance, and Michael Rodriguez didn't have 30 minutes. The transfer alone would likely kill him, assuming County General even had an available operating room and surgical team ready to receive him. "Mr. Fleming, with all due respect, this patient will not survive a transfer. His condition is critical, and every minute we delay increases his chances of death. I'm requesting permission to proceed with emergency surgery immediately." Permission denied. Fleming's response was cold and final. "Dr. Martinez, if you cannot follow hospital policy, perhaps you should consider whether this is the right environment for you. There are other hospitals that might better suit your idealistic approach to medicine." The threat was clear. Sarah had worked at St. Mary's for 3 years, building her reputation as a skilled surgeon and earning the respect of her colleagues. She had student loans to pay, a mortgage on her small apartment, and elderly parents who depended on her financial support. Losing her position here would mean starting over, possibly in a less prestigious hospital with lower pay. But, as she thought about Michael Rodriguez lying in room 314, struggling to breathe while his body slowly shut down, the financial considerations seemed insignificant. She had become a doctor to save lives, not to weigh the economic value of human suffering. "Mr. Fleming, I'm going to ask you one more time to authorize this surgery. This man's life hangs in the balance, and we have the ability to save him right here, right now. And I'm going to tell you one more time that the answer is no." "Dr. Martinez, you seem to be having difficulty understanding the chain of command here. I am the chief administrator, and my decisions regarding patient care and hospital resources are final. Fleming stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. If you persist in this insubordination, I'll have security escort you from the building, and you'll never practice medicine in this city again. Sarah felt a mixture of rage and desperation building in her chest. She looked down the hallway toward room 314, where Michael Rodriguez was dying while they argued about money. The moral weight of the situation pressed down on her like a physical burden. Fine, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. I understand your position perfectly, Mr. Fleming. Fleming smiled with satisfaction, apparently believing he had won the confrontation. I'm glad we could resolve this matter professionally. Now, please arrange for the patient's stabilization and transfer to County General. Sarah nodded slowly, then looked directly into Fleming's eyes. I understand that you're more concerned with protecting the hospital's profits than saving lives. I understand that you view patients as potential financial liabilities rather than human beings in need of help. And I understand that you're willing to let a young father die rather than risk the hospital's bottom line. Fleming's face reddened with anger. Dr. Martinez, you are out of line. I will not tolerate this disrespect from a subordinate. You're absolutely right, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I am out of line. I'm out of line because I became a doctor to save lives, not to serve as a billing consultant. I'm out of line because I believe that human life has value that can't be measured in dollars. And I'm out of line because I'm going to save Michael Rodriguez's life, regardless of your orders. If you proceed with unauthorized surgery, I'll have you arrested for assault and battery. Your medical license will be revoked, and you'll face criminal charges. Fleming's threat carried the weight of legal authority behind it. Sarah unbuttoned her white coat and handed it to Fleming. Then, I guess you'll need to find someone else to wear this. Fleming stared at her in shock as she walked away down the hallway. Dr. Martinez, if you walk away from this hospital, you can never come back. Your career will be over. Sarah paused at the entrance to room 314 and turned back to face him. Mr. Fleming, some things are more important than career advancement. Some decisions define who we are as human beings. This is one of those moments. She pushed through the door into the patient room, where Michael Rodriguez lay unconscious on the hospital bed. His wife had arrived and sat beside him, holding his hand while tears streamed down her face. The monitoring equipment showed his vital signs continuing to deteriorate. Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah said gently, approaching the bedside. I'm Dr. Martinez. I've been treating your husband since he arrived. The woman looked up with desperate hope in her eyes. Please, doctor, can you save him? The nurses won't tell me anything except that he's very badly hurt. Sarah felt the weight of her decision settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had just thrown away her career, her financial security, and her future at this hospital. But, looking at the fear and love in Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes, she knew she had made the right choice. Mrs. Rodriguez, your husband is very seriously injured, but I believe we can help him. However, I need to be honest with you about something. The hospital administration has denied authorization for the surgery he needs because of insurance issues. Mrs. Rodriguez's face crumpled. We don't have insurance. Michael lost his job last month when the construction company went out of business. We've been trying to find the money to pay for coverage, but... Mrs. Rodriguez, listen to me carefully. The hospital's financial policies are not your concern right now. Your husband needs immediate surgery, and I'm going to make sure he gets it. Sarah moved to the bedside and began checking Michael's vitals again. His blood pressure was dropping, and his breathing had become even more labored. Time was running out faster than she had hoped. I need you to step outside for a few minutes while I examine your husband more thoroughly, Sarah told Mrs. Rodriguez. There's a waiting area just down the hall where you can stay close by. As Mrs. Rodriguez reluctantly left the room, Sarah quickly assessed her options. The surgery Michael needed was complex but not beyond her abilities. The main operating room was available, and she knew the surgical team was standing by. The only obstacle was Harold Fleming's bureaucratic obstinacy. Sarah picked up the bedside phone and dialed the extension for the operating room. This is Dr. Martinez. I need or two prepped immediately for emergency surgery. Trauma case with internal bleeding and possible spinal involvement. Doctor, we were told that case was being transferred to County General, came the confused voice of the surgical coordinator.
Change of plans. We're proceeding here.
I'll need Dr. Chun for anesthesia and Nurse Patterson to assist.
Can you have everything ready in 10 minutes?
Dr. Martinez, we've been getting conflicting orders about this case.
Mr. Fleming specifically told us not to prepare for surgery.
Sarah took a deep breath, knowing she was about to cross a line that would change everything.
I'm overriding Mr. Fleming's order.
This is a medical emergency, and the patient will die without immediate intervention.
Prepare or two now.
There was a pause on the other end of the line. Doctor, I need to check with administration before we can proceed. There's no time for administrative approval.
I'm telling you as the attending physician that this patient requires immediate surgery.
If you need written authorization, I'll provide it, but we need to move now. Sarah hung up the phone and returned to Michael's bedside. She could hear commotion in the hallway as word of her defiance spread through the hospital. Soon Fleming would return with security guards, possibly even police officers, to forcibly stop her from proceeding. But she also knew that her surgical team would follow her lead. They had worked together for years, and they trusted her judgment. More importantly, they had become doctors for the same reason she had, to save lives and help people in their most desperate moments. The door burst open, and Fleming entered with 2 security guards flanking him. Dr. Martinez, step away from the patient immediately.
You are no longer authorized to practice medicine in this facility. Sarah didn't move from Michael's bedside. Mr. Fleming, this man is going to die if we don't operate immediately. I'm not leaving him.
Guards, escort Dr. Martinez from the hospital grounds immediately. If she resists, call the police. The security guards looked uncomfortable with the situation. They were accustomed to dealing with disorderly visitors or intoxicated patients, not respected physicians trying to save lives. One of them, an older man named Frank who had worked at the hospital for over a decade, spoke up hesitantly.
Mr. Fleming, are you sure about this?
Dr. Martinez is one of our best surgeons.
If the patient really needs surgery, I am absolutely certain.
Remove her from this room and from hospital property immediately. If she attempts to return, she should be arrested for trespassing.
Sarah looked at the guards with quiet dignity. Gentlemen, I understand you're just doing your jobs. But I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you were asked to prevent a doctor from saving a dying man's life because of money. Frank, the older guard, looked deeply troubled.
Doctor, maybe you should just step outside for a minute and let everyone cool down.
Maybe there's another way to handle this. Frank, there is no other way.
This man has maybe 15 minutes left to live.
Every second we waste arguing brings him closer to death. Fleming's patience was wearing thin. Guards, I gave you a direct order.
Either remove Dr. Martinez immediately, or I'll find security personnel who will follow instructions.
As the guards reluctantly moved toward Sarah, the hospital's public address system crackled to life. Attention all medical personnel. We have an incoming emergency helicopter with multiple trauma victims. ETA is 3 minutes.
All available surgical teams report to emergency stations immediately.
The announcement created momentary confusion as everyone processed this new development.
Emergency helicopter landings were rare at St. Mary's, which lacked a dedicated helipad and usually relied on the larger trauma center across town for such cases. Through the room's window, Sarah could see the lights of an approaching aircraft in the distance. But this wasn't the typical medical helicopter she might have expected. The aircraft was larger, darker, and moved with the purposeful precision of a military flight.
Fleming looked genuinely puzzled. What helicopter? We don't have any scheduled emergency flights tonight.
The sound of rotor blades grew louder, causing vibrations throughout the building as the aircraft settled onto the hospital's flat roof.
Sarah had never seen anything land there before, and she wondered what kind of emergency could require such an unprecedented arrival.
Dr. Chen, the anesthesiologist Sarah had requested, appeared in the doorway looking flustered.
Sarah, what's going on?
I'm getting conflicting orders about surgery, and now there's a military helicopter on our roof.
The pilots are asking for you specifically. Everyone in the room stared at Dr. Chen in shock. Asking for me? Are you certain? They're asking for Dr. Sarah Martinez by name.
They say they need to speak with you immediately regarding an urgent medical situation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had no connection to any military operations, no reason why a Navy helicopter would know her name or seek her out at this particular hospital.
The timing seemed too coincidental to be random. Fleming's expression had shifted from anger to concern.
Military involvement in hospital operations could bring unwanted scrutiny and potential liability issues. Dr. Martinez, if you have some kind of military obligation that you haven't disclosed, this hospital needs to be informed immediately.
Mr. Fleming, I have no idea why they're asking for me. I've never had any military connections or contracts.
The public address system crackled again. Dr. Sarah Martinez, please report to the roof access immediately. This is an urgent military medical emergency requiring your immediate assistance. Sarah looked around the room at the confused faces of her colleagues and the increasingly agitated expression on Fleming's face. Whatever was happening on the roof, it had just dramatically changed the dynamics of her confrontation with hospital administration. I need to go see what this is about, she said, moving toward the door. Fleming blocked her path. Dr. Martinez, you are not authorized to leave this room except under escort to leave the hospital permanently. The authority in his voice was undermined by the uncertainty in his eyes. Military helicopters landing unannounced on hospital rooftops fell well outside his administrative experience, and he was clearly struggling to maintain control of a situation that was spinning beyond his comprehension.
Dr. Chen stepped forward. Harold, if the military is specifically requesting Dr. Martinez for an emergency medical situation, we might be legally obligated to comply. Refusing to provide requested medical assistance could have serious consequences. This is highly irregular. I need to contact our legal department before anyone goes anywhere. Sarah moved past Fleming toward the door. Mr. Fleming, people are apparently injured and need medical help. Whether it's Michael Rodriguez in this room or whoever is on that helicopter, I became a doctor to save lives. That's what I'm going to do. As she walked toward the stairwell that led to the roof, Sarah could hear Fleming arguing with Dr. Chen about proper procedures and liability issues. But her focus was on the questions racing through her mind about what she might find when she reached that helicopter. The stairwell to the roof access was dimly lit and rarely used. As Sarah climbed the concrete steps, she could hear the helicopter's engines continuing to run, suggesting the crew was prepared for a quick departure. The vibrations from the rotor blades grew stronger with each step she took toward the roof. When she reached the heavy metal door marked Roof Access Authorized Personnel Only, Sarah paused for a moment to steady her nerves. She had no idea what waited for her on the other side, but she knew that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Sarah pushed open the heavy roof access door and immediately felt the powerful downdraft from the helicopter's rotor blades. The aircraft dominated the small rooftop space, its dark blue navy markings clearly visible even in the dim evening light. The side doors were open, revealing medical equipment and what appeared to be injured personnel inside. A figure in navy fatigues jogged toward her, shouting over the noise of the engines. "Dr. Martinez? I'm Chief Petty Officer Jackson. We have a critical medical emergency aboard our aircraft." Sarah had to raise her voice to be heard above the rotor noise. "What kind of emergency? What happened?" "We have 3 injured sailors from a training accident. One is critical with internal injuries, similar to what we understand you're currently dealing with downstairs. We need immediate surgical intervention." Sarah felt a moment of confusion. How could they know about Michael Rodriguez? "I don't understand. How do you know about my patient?" Chief Jackson gestured toward the helicopter. "Doctor, we need to brief you quickly. This situation is more complex than a simple medical emergency." As they approached the aircraft, Sarah could see inside the passenger compartment. 3 sailors were lying on stretchers, with Navy medical corpsmen monitoring their conditions. But what caught her attention was a 4th figure, a woman in dress uniform who appeared uninjured but was observing everything with intense focus. The woman stepped forward as Sarah reached the helicopter. "Dr. Martinez, I'm Commander Lisa Thompson, Navy Medical Corps. We need to talk immediately." Commander Thompson was an African-American woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her uniform displayed medical insignia and several ribbons indicating combat experience. She motioned for Sarah to step closer so they could communicate more easily. "Dr. Martinez, I need to ask you some questions about your background before we proceed. Are you the Dr. Sarah Martinez who graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School in 2018? Yes, but I don't understand what that has to do with this emergency. Did you complete your residency at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center?
Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Walter Reed was where she had spent 3 years training in trauma surgery, working with military casualties from overseas operations.
Yes, but that was years ago. I've been in civilian practice since then. Doctor, during your residency at Walter Reed, did you ever treat a Navy SEAL named Lieutenant James Anderson? The name hit Sarah like a physical blow.
She remembered James Anderson clearly, a young SEAL who had been severely injured in an IED explosion in Afghanistan. His injuries had been similar to Michael Rodriguez's case downstairs, with internal bleeding and spinal trauma that required immediate and complex surgery.
I remember Lieutenant Anderson.
He was one of my most challenging cases during residency. But he survived the surgery and made a full recovery.
What does this have to do with your current emergency?
Commander Thompson's expression grew more serious. Dr. Martinez, Lieutenant Anderson is now Lieutenant Commander Anderson, and he's currently the commanding officer of the SEAL team that was injured in tonight's training accident. When his men were hurt, he specifically requested that we find you to provide surgical care.
Sarah stared at the commander in disbelief. He requested me specifically? After all these years?
Doctor, Lieutenant Commander Anderson credits you with saving his life. More than that, he says your surgical technique and innovative approach to his spinal injuries allowed him to return to active duty when other doctors said he would never walk again.
He's followed your career and knows you're now practicing at this hospital.
The implications of this revelation began to settle over Sarah. The timing of this military emergency, arriving precisely when she was facing termination for trying to save Michael Rodriguez, seemed almost impossibly coincidental.
Commander Thompson, I need to be honest with you. I'm currently in the middle of a situation downstairs with hospital administration.
They've forbidden me from performing surgery on a patient who desperately needs it, and they've threatened to have me arrested if I proceed. The commander's expression hardened.
What's the nature of the medical emergency downstairs?
A construction worker with internal bleeding and possible spinal trauma, very similar to Lieutenant Commander Anderson's original injuries.
The hospital administrator is refusing to authorize surgery because the patient has no insurance coverage. Commander Thompson exchanged glances with Chief Jackson, and Sarah could see anger flickering in both of their eyes. Dr. Martinez, are you telling me that this hospital is preventing you from saving a life because of money? That's exactly what I'm telling you. I was just ordered to leave the hospital permanently when you arrived.
The commander was quiet for a moment, apparently weighing her options. Then, she spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to making critical decisions under pressure. Dr. Martinez, I'm hereby requesting your immediate assistance with a military medical emergency. Under the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, this hospital is required to provide all available medical resources to assist with life-threatening injuries, regardless of the patient's ability to pay. That includes releasing medical personnel to assist with military casualties when requested. Sarah felt a surge of hope, but also confusion. Commander, I'm willing to help, but I don't understand how this resolves the situation with my patient downstairs. Doctor, our 3 injured sailors need immediate surgical intervention.
However, I'm also authorizing you to treat any other patients with similar injuries as part of this military medical emergency.
If your patient downstairs has comparable trauma, he falls under the scope of this operation.
Chief Jackson stepped forward with a tablet computer. Dr. Martinez, you'll need to sign temporary authorization papers to provide medical care under military emergency protocols.
This gives you full authority to use any necessary hospital resources.
Sarah looked at the authorization papers on the screen.
The legal language was complex, but the basic meaning was clear. She was being temporarily commissioned to provide emergency medical care under military authority, which superseded normal hospital administrative policies.
Commander Thompson, are you saying that this gives me the authority to operate on Michael Rodriguez despite the administrator's orders?
Dr. Martinez, under these emergency protocols, you have not just the authority but the responsibility to provide life-saving medical care to all patients with similar trauma injuries.
Hospital administrators have no authority to interfere with military medical operations. Sarah signed the electronic authorization with hands that trembled slightly from adrenaline and relief.
The weight of the decision she was making settled over her, she was essentially placing herself under temporary military command to save Michael Rodriguez's life. "What do you need me to do first?" she asked. Commander Thompson gestured toward the injured sailors in the helicopter. "Our most critical patient is Petty Officer Martinez. Yes, he shares your surname, which Lieutenant Commander Anderson says is pure coincidence. He has internal bleeding from a training accident that occurred 3 hours ago. Our field medics have stabilized him, but he needs surgery that's beyond the capabilities of our shipboard medical facilities." Sarah moved to examine Petty Officer Martinez and immediately recognized the severity of his condition. His vital signs were unstable, and his symptoms closely matched those of Michael Rodriguez downstairs. The irony of treating two patients with the same surname and similar injuries wasn't lost on her. "Commander, I can treat Petty Officer Martinez, but he'll need the same operating room and surgical team that I was planning to use for the patient downstairs. If we're going to save both of them, we need to move quickly. Dr. Martinez, you now have full authority to commandeer any medical resources necessary. Let's get both of these men to surgery immediately." As they prepared to transport Petty Officer Martinez into the hospital, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The military authorization had given her the legal cover to save Michael Rodriguez's life, but it had also dramatically escalated the confrontation with Harold Fleming and the hospital administration. Chief Jackson coordinated with the other Navy medical personnel to carefully move Petty Officer Martinez from the helicopter onto a hospital gurney. The other two injured sailors had less severe injuries that could be treated in the emergency department, but still required immediate attention. "Commander Thompson," Sarah said as they prepared to enter the hospital, "I should warn you that the hospital administrator is likely to challenge your authority here. He's very focused on protecting the hospital's financial interests. Dr. Martinez, let me worry about Mr. Fleming. I've dealt with civilian administrators before who don't understand military medical protocols. He'll either cooperate, or he'll find himself explaining his interference with a military operation to some very unhappy Navy attorneys." As they moved toward the hospital entrance, Sarah felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Years ago at Walter Reed, she had worked countless nights treating military casualties, operating under pressure to save lives without regard for bureaucratic procedures or financial considerations. The pure focus on medical care without administrative interference had been one of the things she missed most about military medicine. The automatic doors of the emergency department opened as their group approached with Petty Officer Martinez on the gurney. Sarah could see hospital staff gathering in the hallway, drawn by the unusual sight of Navy personnel entering their facility with a critically injured patient. Dr. Chen appeared at Sarah's side as they moved toward the elevators. "Sarah, what's happening?" "Mr. Fleming is downstairs having an absolute fit about the military helicopter and demanding to know where you went. Dr. Chen, I need you to prep Ward 2 immediately for emergency surgery. We have a military casualty with internal bleeding and spinal trauma. I'm also going to need Ward 1 prepared for the construction worker in room 314. Sarah, Fleming specifically forbade surgery on that patient. If you proceed, he's threatened to have you arrested." Commander Thompson stepped forward, addressing Dr. Chen directly. "Doctor, I'm Commander Thompson, Navy Medical Corps. Dr. Martinez is now operating under military medical emergency protocols. Any interference with this operation would constitute obstruction of military medical care, which carries federal criminal penalties." Dr. Chen's eyes widened as he processed this information. "Commander, I'm the chief of surgery here, and I need to understand exactly what's happening. Dr. Chen, we have multiple critical patients requiring immediate surgical intervention. Dr. Martinez has been temporarily authorized to coordinate medical care for both military and civilian casualties with similar injuries. Hospital administration has no authority to interfere with this operation." As they reached the elevator that would take them to the surgical floor, Sarah could hear commotion from the direction of the administrative offices. Harold Fleming's voice was clearly audible as he demanded answers from his staff about the military presence in his hospital. "Dr. Chen," Sarah said quietly as they entered the elevator, "I need to know if you're willing to assist with both surgeries. I understand if you're concerned about the administrative complications." Dr. Chen looked at the injured sailor on the gurney, then at the determination in Sarah's eyes. "Sarah, I became a doctor to save lives, just like you did. If you have the legal authority to proceed, then I'm with you." Commander Thompson nodded approvingly. Dr. Chen, you should know that your assistance with this military medical emergency will be officially recognized and commended by the Navy Medical Corps. As the elevator doors closed, Sarah felt a sense of purpose returning that she hadn't experienced since her days at Walter Reed. The bureaucratic obstacles and financial considerations that had dominated her work at St. Mary's were suddenly swept away, replaced by the clear moral imperative to save lives. The elevator reached the surgical floor, and they quickly moved Petty Officer Martinez toward the operating room. Sarah could see Nurse Patterson and the surgical team preparing the equipment with the efficiency that came from years of working together on critical cases.
Nurse Patterson, Sarah called out as they approached door 2, we're going to need both operating rooms running simultaneously. Can you coordinate with the or 1 team to bring the patient from room 314 up immediately? Nurse Patterson looked confused but nodded.
Dr. Martinez, Mr. Fleming specifically ordered us not to prepare that patient for surgery.
Commander Thompson stepped forward again. Nurse Patterson, Mr. Fleming's orders are superseded by military medical emergency protocols. The patient in room 314 is now part of this operation. As Petty Officer Martinez was wheeled into or 2, Sarah took a moment to center herself.
She was about to perform 2 complex surgeries simultaneously, each carrying significant risk and requiring all of her skill and experience. But, more importantly, she was about to save 2 lives that would have been lost to bureaucratic indifference and financial calculations. The sound of elevator doors opening announced the arrival of Michael Rodriguez, being transported to or 1 by a team of nurses who still looked bewildered by the rapidly changing situation.
Mrs.
Rodriguez was being escorted to a waiting area where she could stay close to both operating rooms. Harold Fleming's voice echoed down the hallway as he emerged from the stairwell, apparently having run up the stairs rather than wait for an elevator.
Dr. Martinez, you are not authorized to proceed with any surgical procedures.
Security is on the way to arrest you for insubordination and unauthorized use of hospital resources. Commander Thompson stepped into Fleming's path, her military bearing and authoritative presence immediately commanding attention.
Mr. Fleming, I'm Commander Thompson, Navy Medical Corps. You need to step back and allow medical personnel to proceed with authorized emergency surgery. Fleming looked flustered by the sudden appearance of military authority in his hospital.
Commander, I don't know what kind of authorization you think you have, but this is a civilian hospital, and I am the chief administrator. Dr. Martinez is no longer employed here and has no authority to use our operating rooms.
Mr. Fleming, Dr. Martinez is now operating under temporary military medical commission to provide emergency surgical care. Your hospital is required by federal law to assist with military medical emergencies. Any interference with this operation would constitute a federal crime. Sarah paused at the entrance to or 2, listening to the confrontation between Commander Thompson and Harold Fleming.
The moment of truth had arrived. Either the military authorization would hold up against administrative challenges, or she would find herself facing arrest for defying hospital policy. Fleming's face had turned red with anger and frustration.
Commander, I don't care what kind of military authority you think you have. This hospital will not absorb the cost of unauthorized surgery on an uninsured patient.
I'm calling hospital security and the police immediately. Mr. Fleming, Commander Thompson's voice carried the steel of military command, I suggest you call your hospital's legal department instead. Have them research federal emergency medical assistance laws and military medical support requirements.
I think you'll find that your options are much more limited than you believe.
As Sarah entered the operating room, she could hear Fleming continuing to argue with the commander, but the sound gradually faded as she focused on the task ahead. Petty Officer Martinez was already under anesthesia, and Dr. Chen was scrubbing in to assist with the surgery. The familiar routine of preparing for surgery helped calm Sarah's nerves and center her focus. The sterile environment of the operating room represented a return to pure medicine, where success was measured in lives saved rather than profits generated. Through the observation window, she could see Mrs. Rodriguez in the waiting area, her face a mixture of hope and terror as she watched her husband being prepared for surgery in the adjacent operating room. The woman had no idea that her husband's life had been saved by a military intervention that she could never have imagined.
Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision as she made the initial incision into Petty Officer Martinez's abdomen.
The familiar rhythm of surgery helped her focus despite the chaos that had erupted in the hospital around her. Through the observation windows of both operating rooms, she could see the coordinated efforts of 2 surgical teams working to save both patients simultaneously. Dr. Chen was leading the surgery on Michael Rodriguez in or following the same procedures that Sarah had planned before the military intervention changed everything. The construction worker's condition had stabilized slightly during the delay, but his situation remained critical. Dr. Martinez, the surgical nurse assisting with Petty Officer Martinez, called out, "Blood pressure is dropping. We're seeing significant internal bleeding consistent with your preliminary assessment." Sarah had encountered similar injuries during her residency at Walter Reed, and she recognized the distinctive pattern of damage caused by the type of training accident that had injured the 3 sailors. The Navy's combat training exercises were designed to simulate real battlefield conditions, which sometimes resulted in injuries that were indistinguishable from actual combat wounds. "Suction here," she instructed, working to clear blood from the surgical field so she could identify the source of the bleeding. "I can see the damaged vessels. We're going to need to repair the hepatic artery and check for damage to the portal vein." The surgery was complex but not beyond her capabilities. The techniques she had learned at Walter Reed for treating combat casualties were directly applicable to Petty Officer Martinez's injuries. As she worked, Sarah found herself remembering Lieutenant Commander Anderson's case from years earlier, the SEAL whose life she had saved and who had apparently never forgotten her surgical skill. Through the intercom system connecting the 2 operating rooms, she could hear Dr. Chen providing updates on Michael Rodriguez's condition. "Sarah, I'm finding extensive internal bleeding from the spleen and possible damage to the left kidney. The spinal trauma appears less severe than we initially feared, but we'll need orthopedic consultation for the compressed vertebrae."
Good work, Dr. Chen. How are his vitals holding up? Blood pressure is stabilizing now that we've controlled the initial bleeding.
"I think we caught this just in time."
The relief in Dr. Chen's voice was evident.
Michael Rodriguez was going to survive, despite Harold Fleming's attempts to prevent the life-saving surgery. The construction worker would return to his wife and children, never knowing how close he had come to dying because of insurance paperwork. In the hallway outside the operating rooms, Sarah could occasionally hear raised voices as the confrontation between Commander Thompson and the hospital administration continued. Through brief glimpses during the surgery, she had seen additional hospital executives arriving, apparently summoned by Fleming to deal with the unprecedented military intervention. "Dr. Martinez," Chief Jackson's voice came through the intercom from the observation area, "Commander Thompson asked me to update you on the situation outside.
The hospital's legal department has confirmed that military medical emergency protocols supersede normal administrative procedures. Mr. Fleming has been instructed by the hospital's lawyers to cooperate fully."
Sarah smiled behind her surgical mask.
"Thank you, Chief. How are the other injured sailors doing?"
"Both are stable and being treated in the emergency department. Their injuries were less severe, broken bones and concussions, but nothing requiring surgery." As Sarah continued working on Petty Officer Martinez, she reflected on the strange sequence of events that had led to this moment. The military helicopter's arrival had seemed like divine intervention, providing exactly the authority she needed to save Michael Rodriguez's life. But she was beginning to understand that the timing might not have been as coincidental as it first appeared. "Dr. Martinez," Dr. Chen called through the intercom, "I'm curious about something."
"How did Lieutenant Commander Anderson know you were working at this specific hospital?"
"It's been years since you worked at Walter Reed." It was a good question, one that Sarah had been wondering about herself. Military personnel didn't typically track the careers of civilian doctors who had treated them years earlier. There had to be more to the story than Commander Thompson had revealed.
"I've been wondering about that too, Dr. Chen. I'm hoping to get some answers once we finish these surgeries."
The repair work on Petty Officer Martinez's damaged blood vessels was progressing well. The young sailor's condition had stabilized, and Sarah was confident that he would make a full recovery. His injuries, while serious, lacked the complicating factors that had made Lieutenant Commander Anderson's original case so challenging. "Vital signs are improving steadily," the anesthesiologist reported. "Blood pressure is holding at normal levels, and all indicators suggest the repairs are successful." Sarah began the careful process of closing the surgical incision, ensuring that each layer of tissue was properly aligned and sutured. The precision required for closing abdominal surgery demanded the same focus and attention to detail as the repair work itself. Through the observation window, she could see that a small crowd had gathered in the waiting area. Mrs. Rodriguez was there, of course, but she had been joined by several other people who appeared to be Navy personnel in civilian clothes. Commander Thompson was speaking with them quietly, apparently providing updates on the surgical progress.
Dr. Chen, how much longer do you need with your patient? About 15 more minutes for closing and final checks. Michael Rodriguez is going to make a complete recovery, Sarah. You saved his life tonight.
The words carried extra meaning given the circumstances. Sarah had risked her career and, potentially her freedom to save Michael Rodriguez, only to have military intervention provide the legal cover she needed to proceed. The moral weight of her decision had been vindicated, but the professional consequences remained unclear. As Sarah completed the final sutures on Petty Officer Martinez, she noticed a familiar figure entering the observation area. A tall man in navy dress uniform was speaking with Commander Thompson, and something about his bearing and the respectful attention he commanded from the other personnel suggested high rank and authority.
Chief Jackson, Sarah called through the intercom, who is the Navy officer who just arrived? That's Lieutenant Commander Anderson, Dr. Martinez. He wanted to be here when you finished surgery. Sarah felt a surge of emotion as she recognized her former patient.
Lieutenant Commander Anderson looked healthy and strong, showing no signs of the devastating injuries that had nearly ended his military career years earlier. His presence here tonight suddenly made the sequence of events much clearer. Dr. Martinez, Lieutenant Commander Anderson's voice came through the intercom system. Thank you for saving another sailor's life tonight.
And thank you for saving mine all those years ago. Lieutenant Commander Anderson, it's wonderful to see you looking so well. But I have to ask, how did you know I was working here, and how did you know about the situation with Michael Rodriguez?
There was a pause before Anderson responded, and Sarah could see him exchanging glances with Commander Thompson. Dr. Martinez, we've been monitoring your career since you left Walter Reed.
The Navy keeps track of exceptional medical personnel who might be needed for future emergencies. The implications of his words began to sink in. Are you saying the Navy has been watching me?
Dr. Martinez, you saved my life and enabled me to continue my military service. Your surgical innovations with spinal trauma cases have been studied and adopted by military medical personnel worldwide. The Navy Medical Corps has maintained awareness of your location and capabilities in case your expertise was ever needed for critical cases. Sarah finished her surgical work and began the process of transferring Petty Officer Martinez to the recovery room. As she removed her surgical gloves and gown, she processed the revelation that her career had been under military surveillance for years.
Lieutenant Commander Anderson, that still doesn't explain how you knew about the situation with Michael Rodriguez tonight. Commander Thompson joined the conversation through the intercom.
Dr. Martinez, we have contacts throughout the medical community who alert us to situations where exceptional physicians might be facing unjust treatment. When we learned that you were being prevented from performing life-saving surgery because of financial considerations, Lieutenant Commander Anderson authorized this emergency intervention. The full scope of what had happened tonight was becoming clear. The military helicopter hadn't arrived by coincidence, it had been dispatched specifically to provide Sarah with the authority she needed to save Michael Rodriguez's life. The injured sailors were real, but their medical emergency had been used as justification for a much larger operation.
So this was all planned? Sarah asked as she prepared to leave the operating room.
Dr. Martinez, Lieutenant Commander Anderson's voice carried a tone of deep respect. Exceptional physicians should never be prevented from saving lives because of bureaucratic interference.
Tonight we had the opportunity to correct an injustice while also providing necessary medical care for injured personnel.
Sarah left her too and walked toward the recovery area where both patients were being monitored. Michael Rodriguez was conscious and stable, surrounded by relieved family members. Petty Officer Martinez was still under anesthesia but showing all signs of successful recovery.
Mrs. Rodriguez approached Sarah with tears streaming down her face.
Dr. Martinez, thank you for saving my husband's life. I don't understand everything that happened tonight, but I know you fought for him when no one else would. Mrs. Rodriguez, your husband is going to make a full recovery. He'll need a few weeks of rest, but he should be able to return to work without any permanent limitations. As Mrs. Rodriguez hugged her gratefully, Sarah reflected on the moral complexity of the evening's events. She had been prepared to sacrifice her career to save one man's life, only to discover that powerful allies had been watching and waiting to intervene on her behalf. Lieutenant Commander Anderson approached, extending his hand in greeting.
Dr. Martinez, it's an honor to see you again.
You look exactly as I remember from Walter Reed.
Lieutenant Commander, you look remarkably different from when I first met you.
I'm glad to see that the surgery was successful in the long term. Dr. Martinez, your surgical work didn't just save my life, it gave me back my career and my future. I've participated in dozens of military operations since then, operations that wouldn't have been possible if you hadn't refused to accept that my injuries were permanently disabling. Sarah was struck by the parallel between Anderson's original situation and Michael Rodriguez's case tonight. Both had been written off by bureaucratic decision-makers who prioritized financial considerations over medical possibilities. Lieutenant Commander Anderson, I appreciate the intervention tonight, but I need to understand what happens now. Harold Fleming is still the hospital administrator here, and he's not going to simply forget about this confrontation.
Commander Thompson joined their conversation. Dr. Martinez, Mr. Fleming's position has become quite precarious tonight.
The hospital's board of directors has been contacted about his interference with emergency medical care.
Additionally, the Navy Medical Corps will be recommending you for civilian recognition for your service to military personnel. What kind of recognition?
Dr. Martinez, your work with military casualties and your commitment to life-saving surgery under difficult circumstances qualifies you for consultation contracts with military medical facilities.
This would provide you with income and professional opportunities that are independent of civilian hospital politics.
The offer was tempting, especially given the uncertainty of her position at St. Mary's. But Sarah had chosen civilian practice specifically because she wanted to help ordinary people in everyday medical emergencies, not just military casualties. Commander Thompson, I appreciate the offer, but I became a civilian physician because I wanted to serve my local community. People like Michael Rodriguez need doctors who will fight for them against bureaucratic indifference.
Lieutenant Commander Anderson nodded approvingly.
Dr. Martinez, that's exactly the answer I hoped you would give. Your commitment to saving lives regardless of politics or financial considerations is why the Navy has maintained interest in your career.
But what happens now?
I can't continue working here after tonight's confrontation with administration. Dr. Martinez, Commander Thompson smiled, I think you'll find that Mr. Fleming's influence has been significantly reduced. The hospital's board of directors is very interested in retaining a physician who has earned recognition from the Navy Medical Corps for exceptional service.
As if summoned by the mention of his name, Harold Fleming appeared in the hallway, accompanied by two men in expensive suits who appeared to be hospital executives or attorneys.
His earlier confidence had been replaced by obvious anxiety and defensive posturing. One of the men approached Sarah and extended his hand. Dr. Martinez, I'm Richard Hartwell, chairman of the hospital's board of directors. I want to apologize for the events of this evening and assure you that St. Mary's values your exceptional medical skills. Sarah looked at Fleming, who was standing behind Hartwell with an expression of barely contained anger. The power dynamic had clearly shifted, but she wasn't certain what the long-term implications would be.
Mr.
Hartwell, I appreciate your words, but I need to know that physicians at this hospital will be able to provide necessary medical care without interference from administrators more concerned with profits than patients. Dr. Martinez, the board has met in emergency session tonight to review our policies regarding emergency medical care. We've decided to implement new protocols that prioritize medical judgment over financial considerations in life-threatening situations.
Sarah glanced at Lieutenant Commander Anderson, who nodded encouragingly.
The military intervention had accomplished more than just providing legal cover for tonight's surgeries, it had fundamentally changed the power structure at St. Mary's Hospital.
Mr. Hartwell, what about Mr. Fleming's role in these new protocols?
Hartwell's expression grew uncomfortable.
Mr. Fleming will be transitioning to a different role within our hospital system.
The board feels that a new approach to administration is needed to ensure that situations like tonight's don't occur again. Sarah could see the defeat and resentment in Fleming's eyes, but she felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Her goal had never been to destroy anyone's career, she had simply wanted to save Michael Rodriguez's life and protect her ability to practice medicine according to her oath and principles. Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate the board's support, but I want to make something clear. I don't expect special treatment or immunity from hospital policies. I just want the freedom to make medical decisions based on patient need rather than financial calculations. Dr. Martinez, that's exactly the kind of physician we want at St. Mary's. The board would like to offer you a position as head of emergency surgery, with full authority to make medical decisions in critical cases. The offer was far beyond anything Sarah had expected when she walked into the hospital that morning. She had gone from facing termination to being offered a promotion and expanded authority, all because she had been willing to risk everything to save one patient's life. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the newly renovated office that came with her position as head of emergency surgery at St. Mary's Hospital. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating the framed certificates and commendations that had arrived from the Navy Medical Corps recognizing her service to military personnel and her commitment to life-saving medical care.
The hospital had changed dramatically since that night when Lieutenant Commander Anderson's helicopter landed on the roof. The board of directors had implemented sweeping reforms to ensure that financial considerations would never again prevent life-saving medical care.
Harold Fleming had been reassigned to a consulting role with limited authority, and the new administration prioritized medical excellence over profit margins.
Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her morning review of surgical schedules.
The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code suggested it might be from the Navy Medical Facility in San Diego. Dr. Martinez, this is Captain Jennifer Walsh, Commanding Officer of Naval Medical Center San Diego. I'm calling to follow up on Lieutenant Commander Anderson's recommendation that you consider a consulting position with our trauma surgery department.
Sarah had been expecting this call.
Commander Thompson had mentioned that several military medical facilities were interested in her expertise, particularly in treating complex spinal trauma cases like the one that had made her reputation at Walter Reed. Captain Walsh, I appreciate the interest, but, as I've mentioned to other Navy representatives, I'm committed to my civilian practice here at St. Mary's. Dr. Martinez, I understand your dedication to civilian medicine, but I wanted to propose something different. We're looking for a civilian consultant who could spend 1 weekend per month at our facility, training military surgeons in the advanced techniques you've developed. This would allow you to maintain your civilian practice while contributing to military medical capabilities.
The proposal was intriguing.
Sarah had always found satisfaction in teaching surgical techniques to other physicians, and the opportunity to work with military medical personnel again appealed to her sense of service to the country.
Captain Walsh, could you send me more details about what this consultation would involve? I'd need to ensure it doesn't interfere with my responsibilities here at the hospital.
Of course, Dr. Martinez. I'll have the details sent to you today. I should mention that Lieutenant Commander Anderson speaks very highly of your teaching abilities as well as your surgical skills.
After ending the call, Sarah walked to the large window overlooking the hospital's main entrance.
In the distance, she could see the construction site where Michael Rodriguez had returned to work the previous week. His recovery had been remarkable, with no lasting effects from his injuries or the delay in receiving surgery. Mrs. Rodriguez had visited the hospital several times to thank Sarah and the surgical team, bringing homemade food and updates on her husband's progress. The woman still didn't fully understand the complex sequence of events that had saved her husband's life, but she knew that Dr. Martinez had fought for him when others had given up.
A knock on her office door interrupted Sarah's thoughts.
Dr. Chen entered with a cup of coffee and the satisfied expression of someone who had just finished a successful surgery.
Sarah, I thought you'd like to know that the appendectomy in or 3 went perfectly.
The patient is a 60-year-old man with no insurance, and, under the old policies, we would have been pressured to transfer him to County General. Instead, we were able to provide immediate care without any administrative interference. The change in hospital culture had been one of the most gratifying aspects of Sarah's new position. Physicians were now free to focus on medical care rather than financial calculations, and the quality of patient care had improved dramatically as a result.
Dr. Chen, how has the medical staff responded to the new policies? Sarah, morale has never been higher.
Physicians came to work at St. Mary's because they wanted to help people, and now they can do that without constantly fighting administrative obstacles. The nursing staff is happier, patient satisfaction scores are up, and we're actually attracting talented medical personnel from other hospitals. Sarah had discovered that the changes at St. Mary's were being watched by other hospitals throughout the region. The board's decision to prioritize medical care over profits had generated significant positive publicity and attracted patients who specifically sought care at a hospital known for putting people before profits.
Dr. Chen, have you heard any feedback from other hospitals about our policy changes?
Sarah, I've received calls from physicians at 3 other hospitals asking about opportunities here. Word is spreading that St. Mary's has become the place to work for doctors who want to practice medicine the way it should be practiced. The success of the policy changes had validated Sarah's original decision to risk her career for Michael Rodriguez. What had seemed like a desperate act of defiance had ultimately transformed an entire hospital and inspired similar reforms at other medical facilities.
Sarah's computer chimed with an incoming email from the Navy Medical Center in San Diego.
Captain Walsh had sent detailed information about the consulting position, including a proposed schedule that would allow Sarah to maintain her civilian responsibilities while contributing to military medical training. The proposal was professionally compelling and financially attractive, but, more importantly, it represented an opportunity to share the surgical techniques that had saved Lieutenant Commander Anderson's career with other military medical personnel who might face similar challenging cases. Another knock on her door announced the arrival of Nurse Patterson, who had become one of Sarah's most trusted colleagues in implementing the new emergency surgery protocols.
Dr. Martinez, we have an incoming trauma case. Multiple vehicle accident with 3 injured patients expected in about 10 minutes.
2 appear to have minor injuries, but 1 has severe internal trauma.
Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with emergency medicine.
Nurse Patterson, prep or 1 and have the trauma team standing by.
What do we know about the patient's insurance status?
Dr. Martinez, Nurse Patterson smiled. Under the new policies, that's not a question we need to ask anymore. The simple statement captured everything that had changed at St. Mary's Hospital. Medical decisions were now made based on patient need rather than financial considerations, allowing the medical staff to focus on their core mission of saving lives and healing injuries. As Sarah headed toward the emergency department, she passed the hospital's main lobby where a new plaque had been installed recognizing the hospital's commitment to emergency medical care regardless of patients' ability to pay. The plaque mentioned the collaboration with military medical personnel that had inspired the policy changes, though it didn't provide details about the dramatic events of that night 3 weeks earlier.
In the emergency department, Sarah could see the first ambulance arriving with the accident victims.
The scene was familiar, paramedics wheeling in injured patients while medical staff prepared to provide whatever care was needed. But now the atmosphere was different, free from the underlying tension about financial authorization that had previously complicated every emergency case. Dr. Chen was already examining the most seriously injured patient, a young woman who had been driving when her car was struck by a drunk driver. Her injuries were severe but not beyond the capabilities of the surgical team at St. Mary's. Sarah, we have internal bleeding and possible spinal involvement. It's similar to the Rodriguez case, but somewhat more complex. Sarah approached the patient and quickly assessed her condition. The young woman was conscious but in obvious pain, and her vital signs suggested internal injuries that required immediate surgical intervention. Dr. Chen, prep or 1 for emergency surgery. I'll need the full trauma team standing by. As the medical staff moved with practiced efficiency to save another life, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her willingness to sacrifice her career for Michael Rodriguez had ultimately led to a position where she could save more lives with greater authority and fewer obstacles. The patient was quickly transported to the operating room, where Sarah began the familiar process of emergency trauma surgery. As she worked to repair the internal damage, she thought about Lieutenant Commander Anderson's words about exceptional physicians never being prevented from saving lives because of bureaucratic interference. The surgery progressed smoothly, with Sarah's team working in the coordinated rhythm that had made them one of the most respected emergency surgical units in the region. The young woman's injuries were serious but reparable, and her prognosis for full recovery was excellent. Dr. Martinez, the surgical nurse reported, vital signs are stabilizing beautifully. Blood pressure is holding steady, and all indicators suggest successful repair of the internal bleeding. 3 hours later, Sarah emerged from the operating room knowing that another life had been saved. The young woman would return to her family, her education, and her future because she had received immediate medical care without delay or bureaucratic interference. In the recovery room, the patient's family waited anxiously for updates on her condition. Sarah approached them with the news that every family in their situation wanted to hear: their daughter was going to make a complete recovery. Dr. Martinez, the patient's mother, said through tears of relief, "Thank you for saving our daughter's life.
We don't have insurance, and we were afraid that."
"Ma'am," Sarah interrupted gently, "your daughter received the best possible care because that's what she needed.
Financial considerations have no place in emergency medical decisions."
As Sarah completed her rounds and checked on all her patients, she felt the deep satisfaction that came from practicing medicine according to her highest ideals. Michael Rodriguez had returned to his construction work, Petty Officer Martinez had resumed his Navy duties, and now another family would remain whole because medical care had been provided based on need rather than ability to pay.
That evening, Sarah sat in her office reviewing the proposal from Captain Walsh about the Navy consulting position.
The opportunity to teach advanced surgical techniques to military medical personnel appealed to her sense of service, and the proposed schedule would allow her to maintain her civilian practice at St. Mary's. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for Naval Medical Center San Diego. "Captain Walsh, this is Dr. Martinez.
I've reviewed your proposal, and I'm interested in the consulting position. When would you like me to start?"
The conversation that followed outlined a schedule that would have Sarah spending 1 weekend per month in San Diego, working with military surgeons to share the techniques that had saved Lieutenant Commander Anderson's career and enabled him to continue serving his country. As she ended the call and prepared to leave the hospital, Sarah reflected on the unexpected path that had led her to this moment. Her decision to risk everything for one patient had ultimately opened doors to opportunities she never could have imagined. The hospital corridors were quiet as she walked toward the parking garage, but she knew that the emergency department remained fully staffed and ready to provide life-saving care to anyone who needed it. The changes that began with Michael Rodriguez's case had created a medical environment where physicians could focus on their primary mission without interference from bureaucratic obstacles. Outside, Sarah looked up at the hospital roof where Lieutenant Commander Anderson's helicopter had landed 3 weeks earlier. The Navy crew had departed as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind a fundamentally transformed hospital and a physician whose commitment to saving lives had been validated in ways she never expected. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Dr. Martinez, this is Lieutenant Commander Anderson. I wanted you to know that Petty Officer Martinez has made a complete recovery and returned to full duty. Thank you again for saving 2 lives that night, his and mine, years ago. Your commitment to life-saving medicine continues to inspire military medical personnel worldwide." Sarah smiled as she read the message, remembering the young SEAL whose devastating injuries had seemed hopeless until she refused to accept the conventional prognosis. Her willingness to challenge medical orthodoxy and fight for her patients had now created a legacy that extended far beyond any individual case. As she drove home through the quiet city streets, Sarah thought about the young woman recovering upstairs who would wake tomorrow morning with her whole life ahead of her. The patient would probably never know how close she had come to being denied life-saving surgery because of financial considerations, or how the changes at St. Mary's Hospital had been inspired by one doctor's refusal to let a construction worker die for lack of insurance. The next morning, Sarah would return to the hospital to check on her patients, teach surgical techniques to the medical residents, and prepare for whatever emergency cases might arrive. She would also begin planning for her first consulting trip to Naval Medical Center San Diego, where she would share her expertise with military surgeons who might one day face cases similar to Lieutenant Commander Anderson's original injuries. But tonight, as she pulled into her driveway and looked up at the stars visible above the city, Sarah felt the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she had found her true calling. She was exactly where she was meant to be, practicing medicine according to her highest ideals and saving lives without compromise or limitation. The hospital administrator who had dismissed her 3 weeks earlier was now a distant memory, overshadowed by the patients whose lives had been saved and the positive changes that continued to ripple outward from that one night when a Navy helicopter landed on a hospital roof and changed everything forever.